All right, Brendan, sovereign, which your company's name, one of my favorite words right now. It's a term I hear coming up a number of times. I have friends in working in the farming community, people in finance, people looking at understanding land and community and whatnot. I think it's such an interesting concept to really consider. You are specifically helping people in the Bitcoin space. And with just what's happened in the last week alone, it's been fascinating to see how more and more people are looking and really trying to understand the importance of security and making sure that really wherever your funds are, your resources are, that things are secure. But this past week, Bitcoin was in the news for it. So if you don't mind just taking a second to share yourself, your company, the problem it is that you guys solve, and then let's get into it.
Yeah, so we're sovereign. We're spelled a little differently than the actual word sovereign. We're spelled Sovreign. It was a play on words from the founder, with SOV being store of value, like Bitcoin, and reign being the king. So it's like the king of store of value. And that's how the name came to be. It is a little confusing sometimes for people. So I do admit that. It was our founder's choice, and I think we've made the best of it. But just to clear up any confusion over that, and yeah, what we help do is we have three different verticals. We have an education vertical, we have a this family office, high net worth individual, and a retail vertical. And in the education one, we have a curriculum in which it's just like a school course, if you will, but it's very hands-on in integrating actual use of the network on the test network and getting people familiar with actually using the network and understanding the concepts behind it. And the retail facing portion is more just smaller, quick help, get help set up with a hardware wallet, help running a node, and just kind of get your coins off an exchange into your own custody. And then the family office high net worth is much deeper, much more robust setups, multi signatures, multi keys, multi parties, and then along with that, also some long term planning, like inheritance planning, estate planning, things like that. So those are kind of the three different offerings we have, and depending on where you fall on that spectrum, we can help you out with any of those needs.
And I think for someone that maybe isn't that familiar with the space, you offer basically, if I'm not mistaken, basically any financial service that exists in the fiat system. There is some version of some alternative that is has its foundation in the Bitcoin space. Not that you guys necessarily are involved in all of them, but if I understand correctly, that the ecosystem in Bitcoin has so evolved that there are options far beyond what maybe most people who even understand the concept of Bitcoin as a store of value and a medium of exchange, they may not understand how advanced some of this has become.
Yeah, absolutely. And for the stuff we can't do ourselves, we have a very rich partner network. I mean, it's beyond just a partner network. It's, people we know, people that we refer our friends and family to as well for different services. So something like an estate planning, we'll help you map it out. We'll help you come up with what you want to do. But when it comes to like actually documenting it, getting the trusts filed, getting all of that kind of stuff, we'll turn you over to someone else to handle that. But yeah, if you can think of a product, an HSA, a 401k, uh, if there's a financial product out there, it exists in Bitcoin. And even something like setting up your wallet, right? That's kind of the equivalent of opening a bank account for the Bitcoin ecosphere, except you actually own your money and control your money, not the bank. And so every aspect of the financial world can be mirrored onto something that we will help you do in the Bitcoin world, or get you to the right person to help with that. There's insurance products, there's life insurance, there's actual insurance of your Bitcoin. So the ecosystem is really, really growing, as you mentioned, and there will be more and more products out there. But yes, there is a entire parallel system being built on top of Bitcoin.
So you mentioned education. You have some training that exists. Can you maybe give an idea, like if we use the kindergarten through to, through to university, where would you say your education currently sits in terms of, like, for example, the very fundamentals of, like, almost like setting up a bank account at a bank or whatnot, through to understanding how to move some of that, through to where maybe you have a roadmap of where you see this going?
Yeah. So, do you mean me personally, or at the company where?
With Sovereign, yeah. Well,
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
Sovereign, where things are now, but
Yeah.
basically either Sovereign officially or you yourself, where are you seeing some of this, or where would you like to see it go?
Yeah, we would. So, our education program specifically, we have it tiered out. So, ideally, the program is you start in K through two, and you go um, your whole like elementary career, for lack of a better term, just progressing along the way. So, you start with basic concepts, simple things, and something like just basically understanding the concepts of opening an app on your phone, which is something anyone can do, and then understanding the ideas of math and cryptography and things like that, all the way to by the time you're heading into high school or in high school, you're learning how mining works down to the hashes and the nonces that are being created and how that's done through elliptical cryptography. And so the ideal course is kind of just learning more and more as you go through. Finance was something that was never taught in school at all. Personal finance, or maybe if you got a finance degree, all you were learning about was bonds and corporate accounting, things like that. But in terms of actually understanding money, understanding the monetary system, understanding what money is, that's kind of the big unlock. No one knows what money is. No one knows how money works. No one knows how it's created, et cetera, et cetera. And the idea would be that you kind of get this full education about Bitcoin and about money as you progress through just like you do in math. You go from first grade math to second grade math to third grade math, up to all the way up to calculus. The same thing with money and Bitcoin and how the ecosystem works. It can be applied to an education program going through. And additionally, if you aren't starting in kindergarten, let's say, and it's just, hey, you happen to be in sixth grade, this is when your school is going to implement the program and start teaching about this, then it's you kind of pick up from there and go forward and just start at a more advanced level, being able to understand more advanced concepts. But ultimately, the goal at Sovereign would be to start educating these kids as soon as we can, and then watch them spend their entire elementary years and into high school learning about this and progressing as they go, interacting with the network, being able to use tools like AI to help them along the way and interact with the network and set things up for them, and do all that as well. So that's kind of the vision from the education side.
It's interesting. As you were saying that, it made me wonder if there would be a interesting sweet spot, like the Bitcoin ecosystem as a whole benefits from those who participate in it, who, and what basically the essence of believing in something is your participation in it, like much like people talk about voting with your dollars, voting through use either of a store of value or actually using and trading in Bitcoin, as something that you come back to. But as you were talking, it made me wonder if there would be an interesting little niche where you could have young kids at different ages that are learning in this process at every stage for them to teach, almost like kids are creating content about whatever and posting it online about Minecraft videos or toys, tutorials, other things. If you had kids in their own words at different stages teaching a principle that would be understood by others at that age, and if you could earn Bitcoin in that process. So part of, if you're in a process of learning, and as you're learning, you're saying, hey, by the way, if you wanted to help explain this to others to help them understand that, and you do that, that there's a way to earn in that process so that their actual wallet, they do see that wallet move, they do see that ability for it to actually grow. That would be interesting, rather than, a lot of the time with learning, you see kids that are doing some project or something that's detached from reality, and it just feels like, what is the purpose of it?
Yeah,
Interesting.
absolutely. I don't disagree with you, and it's a fine line, right? Because you really do want this to be educational, and the minute you start introducing financial incentives into schools, you run into all sorts of
Hmm.
issues. And so maybe that's something that we could work with the students on, but it would be an initiative of their own, like completely outside of the school,
Mm-hmm.
something they would do. Maybe they could, what you're talking about, offering this education or teaching to someone outside of the classroom, maybe not even at the school, someone somewhere else, and then say, yes, as I am helping do this, I have made the choice as a individual to monetize this and go ahead and do it. So we do everything in testnet, and nothing's done on mainnet, and so we just have to do that because unfortunately, using actual money in schools and education programs, you run into all sorts of bad legal stuff, even if you're very well
Hmm.
intentioned and truly do mean it as an education experience only. So
Fair enough. Fair enough. Well, I look at so many things that seem nutrient deficient, that seem absent of value, that culturally take on, and you look at it, and I think, have you seen the Tuttle Twins
yeah,
episodes?
of course, I
Okay,
have.
nice.
Well, what I haven't seen as many of the episodes, but we have all the books, so we're just starting to read them to my 18-month-old. But I've seen
Yeah.
plenty of the clips. I've watched the Bitcoin one, of course, and there I've watched lots of them. I'm not fully familiar with the full pantheon just because my kid's not quite that age yet. But we have all the books, so
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, I'll mention them a little bit further down the road in that sense. Our 7-year-old just absolutely loves them, but
yeah,
so
yeah.
does our 13 and 15-year-old. I mean, it's so well done, and it's interesting to see these subjects being approached about or talked about. And the one thing I think is interesting is that, much like whether it's The Simpsons or other cartoons that came out now decades ago, and they did not come in tippy-toeing about subjects. They would just put it out there from a comedic standpoint. They put it out there, react however you want. If it's offensive to this group might be, that's fine. This episode might be offensive to that group. They're really just, look, it seems like we're just having fun. I get that feel from the Tuttle Twins, but they're speaking about subjects, and they discuss history, other concepts from other thinkers and leaders, economists, philosophers, where they're explaining this in a way that other kids, using video games or other ways to look at these things, which is different.
Yeah, I absolutely love it. And again, it's one of those things that, as I was mentioning earlier, you never get taught about personal finance or banking or money creation or money period at all. And you also never learn about Austrian economics. I went through college and I didn't learn about Austrian economics in school one time. I read some Hayek, and I read some other Bastiat, excuse me, and some of those other thinkers kind of on my own, but I was never exposed to that school of thinking. And so even just the like being exposed to this, and okay, now I can make my own decisions. It seems like that's something that they won't even entertain in the education system these days as well. And that's why you're seeing places like charter schools, private schools, proprietary schools, something like Alpha School that's just doing something completely different. You're seeing the students thrive, excel, getting outside of the box of sort of the traditional education system because you're just so kneecapped within that system. And forget all the ideology and other things. I'm not even talking about that. I'm just talking about just a simple curriculum you're forced into, and just such rigid rote recitation, and not actually expanding your mind or learning how to think, just memorizing stuff and not really absorbing or retaining anything in such a limited scope of subjects and topics.
Hmm. Yeah, we have homeschooled since 2020. That was a little bit of a catalyst for us when things started to
Mm-hmm.
shift. And I agree with you. I think that there are multiple categories you can have this discussion in. They're not, a lot of people feel like things are caught up in the with ideologies, which is certainly a discussion. It is very polarizing. But if you just strictly look at the purpose of school and you align, the goal is to prepare them to be functioning harmoniously in society, contributing to society, and ideally to prosper so that they too can have safe, loving, constructive households that can then contribute to society, to their community, and grow up in a loving, constructive way, and then to continue that, and to look at the picture of where we were at technologically, economically, socioeconomically, culturally, and say, are these things aligned? Where would we grade them if we took a grading report and we sat down the educators or the school or whatnot and just sat and said, hey, much like they I think good teachers in a loving, caring, compassionate, empathetic way sit down and say, hey, this is ways we think we could improve. It would be interesting to sit down and have look and say, hey, these are some ways that I think you could improve. But our lens for the last few years has been from a like privately educating them in a homeschooling environment. And certainly, the moment you talked about these educational programs, it made me wonder if could my 7-year-old pick up on some of this stuff? Could my 13-year-old, 15-year-old? And then the immediate question after that is, how does it become real, not theory?
Yeah,
And so
one,
that's where I'm wondering, where
yeah,
where
sorry, go ahead.
just where does that traction? Where does it actually, become? Where does the lemonade stand happen? That sort of thing.
Yeah, sorry, you got me a little excited there. I kind of
Yeah,
jumped in on you.
yeah, go for it.
But yeah, that's absolutely the goal. So the goal is to get that training, get that um, get that experience, and on Bitcoin. For those not familiar, there's mainnet, which is the actual Bitcoin network, which is where all the transactions happen, and bitcoins are moved around, et cetera, et cetera. And then there's something called testnet, which is basically um, a play version of that. So like if and you can it functions exactly the same way as the Bitcoin network, but it just doesn't have the so monetary aspects of it. And so you can move coins around, you can do the mining, you can set up a block, you can mine a block, you can do all these different things. And it was initially designed to help developers test things out before they put them into practice, into real life. And that's still the purpose to this day. But it also works great as an education tool because you can learn about the network, see how it all works. Functionally, you won't really know that it's any different than using the actual Bitcoin network, other than if you try to send those coins to someone as payment, it's not going to work. Or send it to an exchange, they're not going to recognize your coins. And so, what that does is it allows the training of folks of kids to or adults or anyone to learn about the network, figure out how it works, and then say, okay, now I understand this. I see what can be built here. What am I going to go do with this information? What am I going to go build on my own? So,
Hmm. So this past week in the news, Cold Card had, and I'll explain it how I understand it, but Cold Card had a breach where I guess the way that they had set their seed phrases, and maybe some of this is a little bit technical, they had used basically a predictable pattern or to do it enough that it was able to be like by brute force, those passwords were able to be guessed. And as a result of, I think like 100 million or something like that was taken. And so I'm curious to know if you have any insight into, like what maybe the community has learned because of that, or were there things to have been avoided to begin with?
Oh man, there's so much here. This has been consuming my life the last 5 days. I've had friends and family that were on cold cards that needed to be immediately moved and get into a better setup. But basically, the underlying there's so much here. But at the end of the day, the cold card was using a random number generator to generate seed phrases, and it wasn't generating enough entropy. You're supposed to have a minimum of 128 bits of entropy to have a properly secured Bitcoin address. That's the 12 words if you're familiar with passphrases, and then 256 bits of entropy is the 24-word passphrase. And so wallets should be generating either 128 or 256 bits of entropy, depending on whether you select a 12 or 24-word passphrase or a seed phrase option. And the cold card on their older models was generating anywhere between 20 to 30 bits of entropy, which is just a complete joke. And their newer models around 70 bits of entropy. And so, to your point, yes, people are brute force attacking this. They're, without getting too technical, they're just effectively guessing wallet addresses from a smaller pool that didn't, because if you don't use enough entropy, it reduces the pool of options that could be picked, and therefore you can find those addresses. And so, one, the lesson is, you know, self custody you need to take very, very seriously. It's not just something where it's like, hey, I'm going to figure this out in a half hour. I'm going to get my coins, into my own custody. Have a plan, figure out what you're going to do, understand what you're doing, really understand the risks, not the risks, but the responsibility that comes with it. And two, that generating your own entropy is really important. And if you are not generating your own entropy, and by generating your own entropy, I mean that 128 bits of entropy or 256 bits of entropy we were talking about earlier. On the cold card, if you did 50 dice rolls, that gave you 128 bits of entropy. And if you did 100 dice rolls, that gave you 256 bits of entropy. And anyone who used that feature on the cold card was fine. And fortunately for myself, I have a bunch of cold cards, but I did do the dice rolls on there, and I generated my own entropy. And so I was never at risk of any of this. That being said, I've completely rethought my setup, and I'm changing a lot, and it's a lot. But at the end of the day, if you can generate your own entropy, do it. And that's the only way to be 100% certain that you're good is if you generate your own entropy. Otherwise, you're relying on the wallet manufacturer. Now, there's the other side of this, which is there's so much scrutiny on all of this that the open source wallet providers are being verified right now, and it appears that Cold Card was the only one with a vulnerability. But again, you're still relying on the hardware manufacturer. You also have supply chain issues, right? Like, maybe one of the Trezor is a very popular wallet. If their supply chain gets compromised, now potentially you have an issue with that wallet. And so thinking about using multiple wallets in multi-signature addresses. So, you need multiple devices to sign one transaction so that if there's a failure of one hardware provider, at least your other hardware providers provide some security there. So, the main lessons are open sourcing your code is really really important so that everyone can verify it, so that you can get eyeballs on it, not just not just for your customers, but for you as a business owner, because you want people looking at it, and you may have missed a bug, and that's what happened supposedly in the cold card case. Was bugs were missed by the people internally reviewing. Um, so having open source software that people can review, having bounty programs as well is a good idea, because then it incentivizes people to look at it. So those are a couple things. Um, and then generate your own entropy. There's some tools out there to help you do that. So to the extent you can do that, do that. But I think the overarching sort of philosophical takeaway from everything is that um, trusting a single source or sort of group think about something. And listen, hand up, I was guilty. I saw very prominent people in the space using this wallet, swore by the wallet, watched them put funds on there, and it gave me a sense of confidence about it. And I just said, well, this one wallet's good enough for me. Now, thank God I did generate my own entropy, but I could have just as easily just used the wallet, turned it on, and accepted the passphrase they gave me. So, always be skeptical. Do research about the products you're buying. Make sure that the code has been verified, and don't just trust what other people are doing around you or saying around you. Make sure that you have some actual documented evidence of what's going on, and that you're not just, hey, so and so recommended this to me, I'm gonna do it. So I think that was a big takeaway from all of this. Sorry, I went for a long time. I could go for much, much longer. There's just so many layers and different things to this as well.
Hmm. I'm curious.
Yeah.
I don't know this to the level that you're speaking about. I do appreciate what you're explaining. For other wallets, I think like Ledger or what is it, Trezor or something
Trezor.
like that.
Yep. Yeah, that's one.
Trezor. Are other wallets at is there, not from this breach, but is there a similar challenge, or either right now, or is that one of the questions or problems to be solved with quantum computing, that some additional level of safeguarding would be needed as computers become like the hardware for computers are enters into a different like era?
So I think there's two separate things here. One, Kimi K3 came out last week, and we've entered a new era of ability of agents or AI to find bugs in things. So we're not even at quantum computing personally. I don't even think we're close to quantum computing. We're just getting really powerful agents that can find bugs. This isn't, when you talk about quantum computing, the risk there is that you break the cryptography, that the computer becomes so good that it can perform those 10 quadrillion gazillion calculations itself. What happened now was it just found bad code. And so the finding bad code issue is absolutely something out there for hardware and software manufacturers to that they're going to have to reckon with. That there's going to be many more bugs found and exploited, and you are going to have increased security on that front. And so lots of people are working through that right now, trying to find different bugs. It it's been reported that there's no issues with the actual entropy and the security, the cryptography on any of the other hardware wallets. So unfortunately, this cold card thing, it's like, could you have a bug on another wallet? Sure. Maybe it discloses privacy, or it mixes up a send address. It could be something stupid like that. But the problem with the cold card one was it was the most important thing. Like, generating enough entropy for your seed. That is the entire value proposition of the elliptical curve in Bitcoin, is that you can hold your own keys in these 12 or 24 words, because entropy is sufficient that no one can ever guess your password. And so um, the level of the failure on the cold card was like the most important thing. Everything to the right of uh, generating proper entropy is like almost irrelevant if you can't get that first thing correct. So that was what was so catastrophic about this. And then the quantum issue is just again, that's in the future, are we going to have to consider it? Yes, people are working on things. It may never happen, but if it does, that yes, there are going to have to be alternatives, different math, different levels of security or options introduced. And I'm going to be perfectly honest, all of that stuff's way above my pay grade, and there's a very small subsect of people that even understand sort of all of the elements involved. But they are working on solutions, and there actually is a break glass of in case of emergency solution out there that, like, if really we woke up tomorrow and there was a quantum computer, there is a solution. It wouldn't be perfect; it'd be messy. The network would be jammed. It would be very slow, but there is an option in sort of a worst case scenario if that were to happen. But there are people working to make that option better and better and better. But that's something that I think is much farther down the road. So
Is this is going back to my, I don't even know if I would say grade six understanding, but is in solving the block, all the computers on the network that are looking to solve the block, right, and then the one that wins it, is the challenge or one of the challenges with a quantum computer that it could constantly be the one that solves the block, or that it has the ability to rewrite aspects of a ledger.
so the, the issue with hashing, that's not something a quantum computer can solve, because it can only hash as fast as the other computer. Like, the mining won't be an issue at all. What's going to be an issue is exactly what just happened with in theory.
Passwords.
Exactly, is
Okay.
your seed phrases will get compromised because the computer is so powerful that it can do those um, you know what are you know requires the energy of 8 trillion suns and 10 trillion years to find an address that in theory that will be able to be done by a computer. So yeah, the mining's not the issue. It's the seed phrases being uncovered.
So, um, from what I understand, the problem you guys help solve is everything from the youngest age of people learning about this tool, being educated, through to really family offices that are looking and want to take this seriously, and they really have a lot in that equation that they need to handle properly. So, in terms of who it is that you're signaling to, like, um, how do people come into your ecosystem? At different levels. Are there specific people that you're looking for, and then if so, what action should they be taking?
Yeah, so the reality is, as to date, it's really just been us leveraging our personal networks and just doing good old fashioned business development, trying to get out there. And um, so it's been it's we've basically been limited by the extent of the people we know. And so we are currently working on potentially coming up with a campaign to get our name out there, to do a lot more and make our services better known, and that we are out there. But at the end of the day, it's just we for someone like a family office, or just a high net worth individual who's kind of on their own. We'll sit down with them, talk with them, figure out what their needs are, what's important to them, what kind of how educated are they about Bitcoin so far? Do they want to learn more? Do they want to just start with a little, or have they done a lot of research and they want to put a bigger portion in? They just don't know how to do it. So we'll sit down with them, go through that assessment, and figure out what's best for them. But at the end of the day, we're really just trying to help them introduce Bitcoin into their portfolio and inheritance planning, their legacy, and just sort of their overall picture of wealth.
Okay, great. So Sovereign, SOVREIGN.io for
That
more information, potentially resources, and on are you guys active? LinkedIn, X, anything specifically that you would direct people to?
Yeah, absolutely. Our X account is at Sovereign, SOVREIGN BTC. So at Sovereign BTC on X. And then you can just find Sovereign on LinkedIn as well. And then personally, I'm Brandon Karpeles, the CEO of Sovereign. You can come find me personally and reach out as well. And that, as I tell everyone, the best way to do it is just go to the website and just send us just do the contact us and shoot us an email, because then there's a bunch of us all looking at it at once, and we'll get back to you ASAP. So
Awesome. Well, we'll stop the recording here, and then we'll wrap up. Cool.
thanks, Caleb.
Thanks, Brandon.
Appreciate you having me on. Yeah.